This lecture is meant to cover Chapter 7 in your textbook, which is um, a quick survey of 5 more of the Old Testament books, the ones that are grouped together under the category of wisdom literature. The themes that your textbook authors have chosen to use to kind of put before you are 2 words that start with the C, as they have been in a practice of doing. One is communion, and the other one is common sense. They refer to the fact that the instructions, the advice, the teachings contained in these 5 Old Testament books deal with getting a right relationship with the vertical, which is with God first, and then getting a right relationship with the horizontal, which is with your fellow man. So communion with God and common sense with your fellow man. This is a maybe useful way of remembering the basic themes of the wisdom literature in the Old Testament. Communion, just to elaborate a bit on that, is the need, um, absolute need of man to dial up God and have a talk. It is sharing intimate thoughts and feelings with the Creator of the universe and the Creator of man. And then, of course, there follows not just dialing up God, but then listening and meditating to the response of God. That is a definition of the kind of communion that you're going to find reflected in the 5 books of the Old Testament that are called wisdom literature. Communion with God, the vertical. Wisdom is something that man uses and needs to do right actions and right thoughts here on earth. So the horizontal, it's what guides for a happy life and a good life in a relationship between men. Wisdom, of course, is not knowledge. Those are 2 different things in a sense. A man, a human being, can have knowledge of all kinds of things and do nothing with it, do nothing right or good with it. Wisdom is learning to live wisely in the everyday nitty-gritty course of life. It's actually putting into wise thoughts and wise actions that which one sees to be good and right. It's the practice of life that plays out in the context of other human beings. That is wisdom. The wisdom books of the Old Testament are 5. They are Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, sometimes your Bibles might read. That list that you see there is not in a chronological order. There are 4 of them that belong more or less to around the same time that we have arrived to, from about the year 1000 BC to about the 6th century BC. But there's one of them for sure, that would be Job, that belongs to actually chronologically about 1,000 years before. But it's placed here in the Old Testament because it is a great example of the kind of literature that the other 4 are as well, even though they take different slants, different approaches, wisdom literature, so to speak. So we're going to take a closer look at Job, but we're going to take a quick survey look at Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs in this particular lecture and in chapter 7 of your book. Your instructor, I am going to choose to step aside and give a little more depth to a look at a very fascinating book called Book of Job, one of the 5 wisdom books of the Old Testament. Mr. Oswald Chambers, from the turn of the century, he put it in very practical ways that maybe can help you and I to view it less from a literary or academic view, but more of a how-to view. The book of Job, in its simplest form, is how to suffer. One of the conditions of man, tragically, is pain and suffering. And the book of Job is a long book, a long story that basically deals with how to deal with suffering. Now, the Bible as a whole does not, like for example, Buddhism does, say that suffering is the biggest problem of mankind. The Bible says sin is the biggest problem of mankind, but the Bible does deal with how to handle suffering, and the book of Job is a marvelous approach to that. The book of Psalms is how to pray, or how to praise, or how to sing. Various ways in which you can look at that one. The book of Proverbs is how to choose, how to act rightly, how to act rightly, justly. The book of Ecclesiastes is how to look at this life and find meaning in it, so how to enjoy life. And the Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, is a very unique book about love. It's how to love, and it's talking about physical love, even sexual love implied often. So a book that kind of stands out, and in the Bible as approaching a subject which is not taboo, because God created sex, and so it is dealt with in the Old Testament as well as in the New. So here's another way to look at it. The five wisdom books contain, say, our authors of chapter 7, 4 imperatives. An imperative is a command, is a must. Do these things. As you read through or take a look at the wisdom books of the Old Testament, you come out of it with a feeling that you've got to do certain things. Number one, you need to use the brain that God gave you. You need to think, not only think, but think for yourself. Use the rational intellect, the ability to reason. As sophisticated as animals may be, or other creatures, none of them have the ability to have a conscience or to think like man does. And again, when I use man, I don't mean gender, I mean mankind, human species. We are called upon to use the ability that we have to think. Secondly, a second imperative, a must. We've got to then not just use that brain, but also spend time to reflect on repercussions, on meanings, reflect. Use time that we are given to look through all options, all repercussions of an action, of an idea, etc. We are called upon, a third imperative is to discern. To discern means to choose, to not follow indiscriminately everything that comes our way, every idea that is part of our time, our culture. We are to choose carefully. Just to give a quick example, sharks are animals that have two functions, to eat and reproduce. And they have a very, very small brain, unlike ourselves, and they sometimes mistake us for a seal. A seal is much more appetizing, but when they view us sometimes from below, they indiscriminately just simply take a bite. That may be a kind of a silly example, but sharks don't discern. Human beings are called to discern. To discern is to be discriminatory, to not swallow every idea or fad that comes our way. Definitely coming out of the wisdom books, of ancient culture, Jewish culture, come the imperative, the must. You've got to make choices very carefully. Don't swallow everything that somebody sends your way. And the last imperative is understand what's going on. Figure out, discern your times. Look at what things people are doing, understand the motives behind them, and therefore be deeper in your experience of living out your lives. So think, reflect, discern, and understand. Another way of viewing overall in a broad sense the 5 books of wisdom literature of the Old Testament. One other maybe helpful hint at these 5 books. Wisdom. Wisdom is about the horizontal. It's about living out wisely the life that we're given here on earth. Wisdom is about helping God's people to make wise decisions through very practical, everyday guidance, and that will eventually, if the right choices are made, develop strong character, strong inner strength, and make us all that we can be as human beings, as God created us. We are the top creative act of God, and we're meant to grow and to develop and to have a strong character that is made out of careful examination of the situations we find ourselves in, and by making wise decisions. Wisdom books, very important part of the Old Testament canon. So the first one that we want to look at very quickly is the Psalms. The Psalms in the Hebrew, it's called Tehillim, which means praises. And of course, a whole lot of the Psalms begin with praise or use the word praise or are praises. It is the songbook of the Old Testament, or the hymn book of the Old Testament. So it's meant to be, it's in poetry, of course, elevated human language, not in prose, and therefore it has a musicality to it. A psalm is simply a religious song. We have, music is a gift from God, and it is used for entertainment, for secular purposes, to tell stories, but then the most elevated use of music is music for in praise to God. So again, the vertical hymns or psalms that are meant for God, and then of course the horizontal hymns of encouragement, advice, teaching, wisdom, that we speak to each other man to man, so the horizontal. The word psalter is sometimes used to describe the Psalms. It's a collection of songs or hymns, highly elevated songs, very carefully crafted in poetry. The Psalter is a hymn book of the people of God at worship. Worship is the vertical, Worship is when we offer praises to God. So while our hymn books may contain both hymns of worship to God and then hymns that are of encouragement to each other, the Old Testament Psalms is the words and music, in a sense, musical words that are meant to help a man praise, worship God, in the worship of God. The major composer of the collected Psalms is David. David was not just a king, a warrior king, but he was also a very musically inclined. He played a harp. He used his harp to soothe the headaches of King Saul. Here you see again one of the important functions of music to bring solace, to bring some help, like we might use aspirin or something like that. Music is actually a non-chemical version of helping out with depression or a headache, a physical headache. That is the case of David with King Saul. But David writes many extremely beautiful, if not touching and wrenching uh, psalms. 73 of the 150 in the Old Testament are by him. The psalms were collected over a period of probably maybe even about to 1,000 years, and are collected by the collectors, whoever they were, the Jewish rabbis and scholars, into 5 books. And 5 is probably an imitation of the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Torah. So they collected them into basic themes or something like that into 5 books. And they originate from the times of Moses, a few of them, around 1500 before Christ, at least some scholars think, to some that probably originate from around the 6th century before Christ, what's called post-exilic, after the Hebrew people are taken into exile into Babylon. So over a period of about 900 years, these hymns derive, but they are existent in this collected format by the time of the 6th century before Christ, by most accounts. Here is a quick look at kind of how the organizers put them into these 5 books. Not needing to emphasize any more than that, but it is probably intended to parallel the 5 books of the Pentateuch, that they organized the hymns into 5 books. So you'll find at the end of Psalm 41, you'll find the heading, Book 2. And then at the end of Psalm 72, you'll find the heading Book 3. Just a note as to why that happened when they collected them for the use of the Jewish people. There are 2 major categories of psalms overall. There are, of course, the ones of praise. Many of the psalms are hymns of praise. This category is a kind of the words give thanks to God for the blessings that he has given, or simply for the various aspects of the character of God, his faithfulness, that have such a beneficial effect on individual man and collective people of God. They can be, however, heart-wrenching psalms coming out of very disturbing moments of loss and the experience of the psalm writer. They can be hymns of lament. This category is a song of pain, therefore, anguish, because real life contains moments of exhilaration and thankfulness, but it also contains moments of great loss and anguish, in which the writer of the the writer of the Psalms is brutally honest with God and says, I am lost. I need you to step in and help me. I put my trust in you. Of course, one of the most, if not the most famous of all the Psalms is Psalm 23. And just for the sake of highlighting it, let me read all of it. It is short, yet it is extremely deep and has meant for the last 3,000 years now so much to so many over time. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Beautiful illustrations, metaphors. God is shepherd. We as sheep, we're taken care of by his guidance. He leads us into green pastures. There's the metaphor of being at a dinner table where he sets the plates, and he takes care, and we are in his family, and we are protected from enemies. God always gives to overflowing. Um, there are going to be hard times. We walk through the valley of shadow of death, the reality of the finality of the physical human life is not underestimated. It is death scares, uh, and God is there to guide through the valley of the shadow of death because God is there forever. Maybe this is a saying, a pithy, short saying that you've heard. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This comes, one of the many, many that come out of the book of Proverbs, one of the other Old Testament wisdom pieces of literature. Proverbs 1, verse 7. You want to know thing? We'll start with this. You need to learn to fear the Lord God. Phobos in Greek is, in the biblical sense, not a bad fear, but a good fear. Fear is a good thing. To know, to know who God is, His awesomeness, His all-powerfulness, but also a good kind of fear leads you to avoid dangers and avoid mistakes that are costly. So fear is used in a good sense in this case. Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is a collection of norms, not just laws, but cultural standards. They're not going to be spelled out like Mosaic law and do nots, but they're going to be spelled out as this is a wise thing to do and this is a foolish thing to do. Proverbs is a collection of norms of everyday living, things that are true, whereby true is what is good and best for human beings. If God created the human being, which Genesis says he did, he created mankind, he knows how we should best operate. And these proverbs are divinely inspired norms by which to live a fulfilled and fulfilling life. The topics addressed in the book of Proverbs have to do with practical life, which is where you and I live at, like people did 3,000 years ago. We are at work, a great part of our life. A lot of our do's and don'ts and it has to do with relationship with our friends. So the Proverbs address how to deal with friends, what kind of friends we should have. Of course, child rearing is addressed as a major factor of the human condition. Marriage, of course, another very important relationship in the human experience. And God created marriage. And then honesty. And of course, the implication is dishonesty, the opposite of honesty, is one of the major problems of bad relationships in the human experience. So, wise advice in how to deal with work, friends, child rearing, marriage, and honesty. So here is another quick look at the book of Proverbs before we quickly move on to another one of the wisdom literature pieces of the Old Testament. There are in the various wisdom pithy sayings of this book of Proverbs, there are stock characters. And in general, there is the tragic or the fool, and there is the wise. They're kind of contrasted, okay? Stock characters. But you can break it down even more than that. There is a human being that is naive. Naive means they don't know what they need to know, don't bother to inform themselves more. Not simple in the sense of low IQ. That's not it. They are naive in the sense they just don't ask themselves important questions. And that is a character that is addressed in the pithy sayings of the book of Proverbs. The naive person is a person that is not very smart. Again, this is not to do with IQ or with formal education, but they don't use the brain that God gave them. And they don't want to be informed. They don't bother. They have faith, but they don't discern. They don't make choices. So they're likely to believe anything with their misplaced faith. They put their faith, they just go with the flow, or go with fads, or don't examine or ask questions. And this is one of the type of characters that is addressed in the book of Proverbs. The second one is the full-fledged fool. The fool is a person that, again, doesn't use the brain that God gives them, doesn't ask important questions, doesn't think for themselves, but they think that they're smart. They think that they're, informed. They are too clever in their own eyes. They think themselves smart to need faith or to seek wisdom. They don't seek advice. They don't need God's help or God's advice, for they think they know it already. The person that knows it already, that is a stock character in the book of Proverbs that's defined as a fool. What's interesting about all of these characters is that they fit cultures and all times. They can apply to our times. They do apply to the 10th century before Christ. The third type of character that comes up in the Proverbs is a scoffer, the mocker. This person has you could say intellectual abilities, humanly speaking, as humans define smart, but they do not have faith in God. They are the skeptic. They eliminate, don't need advice from the Bible, don't need advice from my maker. Thus, their intellect does not translate into wisdom. To know something doesn't mean that you are wise. And they become merely clever. Too clever for their own good. In fact, they are arrogant. They think that they don't need help. They can figure it out on their own. They're too clever for their own good. They're arrogant skeptics. A last and final type of character is the one that is, of course, advocated, and that's the wise person. What is truly wise person, whether in our time or 30 centuries ago? A wise person is a person that is smart, uses all the intellectual abilities God gave them. They are discerning. They make wise choices. They're always eager to listen first, not talk. Learn more. You don't know it all already. They have faith in God and always integrate their learning with their faith. You can get a PhD in a human secular institution, but you condition and view all of the learning and facts that you get from humans with the glasses or the filter of faith and God and His Word. That is a truly wise person. These are kind of four characters, stock characters, that are in the book of Proverbs. The major units of Proverbs deals with a father giving advice to his young son. Again, amazing how applicable to modern day times. You will find the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs. Then there are pithy proverbs, short sayings. Pithy means short, concise, that are contained in the next 19 chapters for all kinds of aspects of life. Very unique is chapter 30, which are called Proverbs Agur, or however pronounce that, a person named Agur, and I'll take a quick look at some of those in the next slide. And then there's another chapter that are kind of collected as entitled Proverbs of King Lemuel's mother. Won't take time to take a look at those, but that's kind of the basic divisions of the book of Proverbs. A quick look at one of those chapters, the Proverbs of a person named Agur, chapter 30. And one of the neat things that Agur opens up with is a confession, which if you study Greek philosophy and Greek culture, you will find appearing again, later on in history, in Athens, Greece. I know nothing, says Augur. Um, uh, Basically stating that, the beginning of knowledge is to say, I don't know what I need to know. I am not aware of everything. I am constantly learning, not only from life, but from God. I have not arrived. A wise person recognizes their limits. I've still got stuff to learn. The beginning of knowledge is to say, I don't know everything that I need to know. What's interesting about that proverb of Augur that opens up chapter 30 of Proverbs is that the Greek philosopher Socrates will come to that conclusion, like Augur, centuries before. Augur precedes Socrates. Socrates dies in 399 before Christ in Athens, Greece, and he will say that a wise person is a person that realizes he doesn't know everything. Interesting parallel. Another interesting thing that Augur says, again, I'm paraphrasing, we should know our place as human beings. Only God moves between heaven and earth. Man does not. We don't have a perspective that includes everything here on earth and everything in the heavens. So better trust God. There's a prayer for two things that Augur makes to the God of heaven that represent a sign of wisdom. So a man should say to God, please keep me from not just the bad stuff, but the false stuff. Keep me in truth. Keep me from falsehood. A prayer of a wise person. Secondly, give me just enough. Realization that money and possessions and land can be a real problem to living a wise life for most people. Very few people can handle the effect that wealth and money and power gives. Make me not rich, but not poor. Somewhere in between is the prayer that Augur makes. There is in the rest of the chapter of the Proverbs of Augur, chapter 30, a description of 4 types of human beings that are loathsome, that are despicable, that are not to be modeled or to be imitated. Don't be like the person that has no respect for their parents. Don't be a person that is immoral, violates sexual mores as God made them, and then denies being immoral, redefines morality so that they kid themselves they are not violating a way in which God designed them. There is another kind of loathsome person as described in the book of Proverbs, which is the arrogant person, the prideful person, thinks themselves to be hot stuff. And lastly, another loathsome type of person is somebody that takes advantage of the poor, plunders the poor. Interesting in the chapter 30 is also the description of a selfish person. One who demands attention and things for themselves. And there's a story about a leech, a person that a man that is a kind of a leechy person with 2 daughters that he nicknames Give and Give. So some very delightfully, but a warning about a person that is so self-referenced, self-focused, that they even name their own 2 daughters that way. It ends with a riddle. The riddle about an adulteress who thinks illicit sex is like an eagle or a snake or a ship, all of which, if you think about it, leave no trail behind. An eagle flies in the heavens doesn't leave behind a trail. A snake that slithers doesn't leave behind a trail, and a ship in the sea doesn't leave a trail. the adulteress thinks that they are like those, and there are no consequences to the actions that they make when they practice illicit sex, but that is the action of a fool. Well, that's just a quick look at one chapter of Proverbs. The book of Job, I'm going to spend more time on that in another lecture that will follow, but the book of Job, very quickly, is another wisdom literature piece, and it presents wisdom for times when bad things happen to good people, to righteous people. Job is not a perfect man, sinless man, but he's a man who, by all accounts, does not deserve all the incredible vicissitudes that happened to him. The loss of his children, the loss of his health, the loss of his possessions. So we're going to take a quick look at more in depth at this amazing narrative, this 42 chapters of the book of Job, and about the times. And we're going to take a look close. Let me go further, excuse me. So, one quick look at the theme of the fifth book of wisdom literature, Ecclesiastes, a book that was written by King Solomon himself, who was gifted with wisdom by God. The Ecclesiastes is a 13-chapter long book about a search that a wealthy, powerful, gifted King Solomon, a search that he went on, looking for, in spite of the fact that he had everything material that you could conceive of, a great kingdom, a great palace, built a great temple to God, money, possessions, influence, wisdom, but he went on a search for the meaning of life, human life. And what the end result of this search of his, which is more or less narrated in the book of Ecclesiastes, is that if you just use your reason, your human reason, and nothing else, a strictly rational approach to life will fail. The word that keeps popping up throughout the search that King Solomon goes on is meaningless, without meaning. The word in Hebrew is hebel. In Hebrew, usually the word for, it's the word that's used, hebel, for breath or vapor, especially as referring to kind of a cloud of vapor, something that you see and then it's gone. That is the word that King Solomon uses to say what human life is all about, what you and I as human beings are. We're just a speck, a vapor. Our life is passing, it's here and it's gone, and life, physical life, is just hebel. The English Bible translates hebel, meaningless, vanity, futility, lack of meaningless. That's the conclusion that King Solomon comes to. Boy, if you simply look at a life under the sun, that is, you don't look up to God, you don't look up to a larger perspective of the human condition and human life, then things seem meaningless. So it's a kind of a downer for about 12 chapters. And only at the end, to make sure you get to the end, then suddenly you realize what he's saying, which is, if you look at this life only with the eyeglasses, the perspective of here and now, and what you don't look up and see it from the perspective of the divine and God who gives meaning to all of human life, well then everything is just hebel, meaningless, vanity, futility. I don't care how much money, possession, fame, beauty, handsomeness you have, hebel, meaningless. He should know. He had it all. And his conclusion is, without God, without a larger perspective, it's all hebel. So, look up, King Solomon's advice is. Look up beyond the horizon. Look up, and you will find meaningfulness to life. Fear God. That's how I said 13 chapters. I meant there are 12 chapters in Ecclesiastes. Verse 13, the last verse of Ecclesiastes chapter 12 is, fear God and keep his commandments. This is the duty of all mankind. This is the answer to the riddle, the solution, the problem. This is what gives meaning to all of human life. So what to apply from Ecclesiastes? If you can repeat the meaningless search of King Solomon if you like, but if you want to take his advice, searching for meaning apart from a correct relationship with God is futile. It's a waste of human life. This is his advice. One last look at another work by King Solomon. It's hardly ever mentioned, quoted. It's kind of a sensitive topic, which is kind of ironic in our time when so much of our culture lives in a kind of hyper-sexualized environment, whether it's movies or entertainment or commercials or whatever else. The Song of Solomon deals with physical love between a married man and a woman. And that is the topic of it, and it's very unique. It deals with courtship, the courting of a man for a woman. It deals with the wedding, and then it deals also with the honeymoon. So the yearning, physical union of a man with a woman, a bride, a spouse, all of that is deeply embedded in the poetry and in the imagery of the book of Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, as it's spoken about. Now, for a man that had 1,000 wives, this seems kind of out of place. Again, a reminder to you, Solomon knew what was wise. He didn't practice it. 1,000 wives was not authorized or blessed by God. So Song of Solomon says what Solomon should have done, not what he did do. And that's one of the major faults of King Solomon. To conclude, blessed is the one who does not walk in the steps with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. Those who delight in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. Psalm 1, verses 1 and 2. This has been a quick look at Communion and Common Sense, Chapter 7. What will follow is a kind of a more in-depth look at the book of Job.